Good afternoon. Welcome to Lions HR Training. We're going to be talking about prevention of sexual harassment today. Really important topic. It's going to be something that is pertinent to every workplace. And unfortunately, if we don't pay attention to it, it becomes an issue. So this is not something that we can ignore and hope will just go away, because the stakes are just too high for us to ignore sexual harassment in the workplace. Today, I'm going to stick to the point. I'm going to hit the high points. Of course, every situation is going to be a little bit different. So if you don't get an exact answer to a particular situation, or you have a very specific question that you want to ask, I suggest that you talk with your on-site HR professional or call your regional HR manager from Lions HR, and we would be happy to discuss your particular situation and get you an appropriate answer. Let's go over some of the key points that we're going to talk about today. The first is we're going to answer the simple question, what is sexual harassment? Now you're saying, oh, why are we talking about this? Well, I'll tell you what, your new supervisors may not understand what sexual harassment is. Your employees may not understand what sexual harassment is. And so you wonder sometimes, somebody comes to you and says, hey, so-and-so did such and such, and you're thinking to yourself, how in the world did you not come to me before this point in time? It's because they didn't know. They didn't know what sexual harassment was, so we're going to talk about that. Is there more than one kind of sexual harassment? That's an important point to know. Who can commit acts of sexual harassment? May be interesting when you find out just who can be responsible for acts of sexual harassment, and it may expand the scope of your attention and the places that you look for instances of potential sexual harassment in your workplace. Is touching someone the only way sexual harassment can occur? It's a valid question. What should I do if I experience something I think may be sexual harassment? This is going to be very practical advice that you can give to an employee. Maybe you're an employee and you're listening to this recorded on the website, and you're saying to yourself, okay, now I can identify it when it happens. Or you may be a supervisor. This is something you can use to describe to an employee of yours what to look for to determine whether they may be sexual harassment. And then what is okay? Are there certain behaviors that are okay in the workplace, or is everything suspect? And then the second question is, what is not okay? What's definitely a no-no when it comes to behavior in the workplace? So let's answer that first question. What is sexual harassment? Well, sexual harassment occurs, just like you can see on your screen there, when the refusal of granting of sexual favors is the basis of any employment action, including raises, promotion, or termination. What I'm saying here is this. For somebody to say, yes, I will do such and such for you in return for a raise, or if I don't do such and such, I am not going to get a raise, or I will not get a promotion. Now, this is a particular form of sexual harassment that is very noticeable. You know when it's happening. Now, the second kind is actually the more prevalent kind in the workplace, and this is when behavior becomes so offensive that it makes it difficult or even impossible for you to do your job. This is where behavior goes on and an employee endures it, and usually when they come to you and say they've got a problem, it's been going on for a while. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how you can avoid that situation in the first place. So there are two basic types of sexual harassment. The first is quid pro quo, and that simply means this for that. Okay, it's a Latin term for this for that. And that's that first type I was talking about. You do this for me, I'll do that for you. Or if you don't do this for me, I will not do that for you. And it's very obvious, and quite frankly, it's not the most prevalent type in the workplace, but it does happen. So quid pro quo, that is the first one. And the second is quite simply a hostile work environment. And that hostile work environment is where a person feels so uncomfortable and the behavior is so pervasive and ongoing and severe that a person feels like it's very difficult or impossible to do their job. Let's talk about quid pro quo. Quid pro quo harassment occurs when a person in leadership offers any employment benefit in exchange for sexual favors. It can also occur when refusal to grant sexual favors results in the denial of employment benefits, such as desirable assignments, raises, and promotions. So I put that the person has to be in leadership. Another term you could use there is authority. A person in authority offers an employment benefit because this person has the power to affect the outcome of a situation for an employee. That's why, and you're going to see later on in the presentation, it is so dangerous and it's actually quite foolhardy to have dating and intimate relationships in the workplace. Why is that? Well, it's not a problem when everyone is happy. Everything is kittens and puppy dog tails when everyone is happy. But what happens when things go bad? What happens when there's a breakup? Now, these consensual actions that before were welcome kind of caused feelings of warmth and affection. Now they become potential sexual harassment. Think about it. If a person breaks up and they go to the person and say, oh, won't you please come back to me, please, I was wrong, please come back to me, please come back to me. Now, some people would say, well, that's just romantic. That's the nature of a relationship. Well, if that happens in the workplace and the person says, no, I don't want to come back to you, and that continually goes on, now you have a sexual harassment situation, and we don't want to get into that at all. The hostile work environment, like I say, this is a more common kind of sexual harassment that you're going to find. It is characterized by when a pervasive, ongoing, severe type of conduct makes the workplace so offensive or intolerable that a person feels like they can no longer continue working there or they just dread coming to work. Here's some sources of a hostile work environment. And this isn't an exhaustive list, but it includes a few things. Offensive kidding. By the way, let me teach you something here. When you make a sexually charged remark and then you say just kidding, saying just kidding does not erase the fact that you made that sexually charged comment. So saying just kidding is not an excuse for off-color joking or offensive kind of behavior. There's joking, name calling. Name calling. One of the things that I see sometimes is a name tag. If a person's name is Brenda, then the name tag says Brenda. It doesn't say boom boom. It doesn't say baby or something along those lines. It says Brenda. We want to keep things generic. We want to keep things professional and about business at work. We don't want to get overly casual. We don't want to get sexually charged content in our workplace. Touching. I'm going to talk about touching here for a second. With my managers that I've had in times past and currently, I will tell them that I have 3 rules when it comes to touching. The first is don't touch employees. And I actually have them write this down. Don't touch employees. And I say, okay, write down number 2. So they write down number 2 and I say, don't touch employees. And they look up at me and I say, write it down. And then I say, number 3, can you guess what it is? And they all say in unison, don't touch employees. And that's because it is so important. You wouldn't believe how many times my experience and the experience of many other leaders that simply a leader putting their hands on somebody, even if they did not intend it in a sexual manner, caused them all manner of problems because touching is such a charged action. It is actually defined legally. If you put your hands on somebody, then it has legal ramifications. So you never ever want to touch your employees. Now, does that mean that we walk around and pretending like our employees are like boiling hot lava and we're avoiding just the possibility of brushing against them or touching them in any way? No, of course not. There are certain socially acceptable forms of physical contact. For example, if I extended my hand to somebody like I was going to shake hands, they would extend their hand and shake hands. In all likelihood, that is a socially acceptable form of touching. I remember one case where a business where I was working had a robbery, and there was an employee there, and they were visibly shaking like a leaf, okay? Now, there were police around. There were other employees around. The room was lit. There was a bunch of people around. and I put one arm in an open stance around this person and said, you did the right thing, you are safe, you and your employees are going home safe tonight, you did a good job. Now, by any stretch of the imagination, could that be considered sexual harassment? Of course not, okay, because of the way in which it happened. But as a supervisor, the way that you can be 100% sure that you're not going to get into trouble is simply don't touch employees. Don't hug people. Well, this person's been my friend for years. Okay, let's play that out. So you hug this one person all the time. Now the other employees look and say, well, they hug this person, they don't hug me. That's favoritism. Do you see where I'm going with this? If you don't touch your employees, you'll be so much farther ahead. Please don't. Leaning against people, poking, tickling, engaging. Had situations where the employee said, well, I was just joking around, tickling the person, and when I looked on video, they were touching them sexually. That's certainly not tickling by any stretch of the imagination. And then perception. It determines the nature of the action along with a reasonable person standard. Now, why do I say a reasonable person standard? Not if I hold a door open for somebody and they say, oh, that's sexually harassing. Of course it's not. Because a reasonable person would not consider that to be sexual harassing. However, there are circumstances where something you think is not harassing could be offensive to a person. For example, let's say the way that you were brought up and your interactions, a person conveyed sincerity by putting a hand on your shoulder when they spoke to you, all right? And you picked up this behavior, and you're talking to an employee that you're disciplining, and you put a hand on their shoulder. Well, they may interpret that very differently. They may see that as a threatening kind of a touch. They may see that as, or misconstrue that action as something other than what you intended. Once again, if you don't touch them, you will not be in that situation. So please refrain from touching employees. Now, is it always about touching? No. Sexual harassment does not have to include touching. Well, what do I mean by that? How in the world could there be sexual harassment without touching? Well, it can occur by leering, staring, facial gestures, making sounds, whistles, viewing pornography at work, and making consensual comments that are overheard and cause offense. Now, wait a second, Dave. Consensual comments. Doesn't that mean that you both are okay with it? Yes. You're both okay with it, but the person that overhears it, the person that has to witness flirtatious or overtly affectionate or sexually charged behavior, it can be a cause of third-party harassment to them. So once again, we need to just keep the workplace professional. Let's do our work. Let's be about the business of the company and keep other activities outside of the workplace. Sexual harassment does not have to be done directly to another person. This is exactly what I was saying. It can be the result of overhearing or having to witness flirtatious or romantic behavior. So here's a common thing that happens. Let's say you have two coworkers and they're working on building a pallet, or they're washing dishes at the sink, or they're building graphic garments, whatever they're doing. But they're side by side or across from one another, and they're talking about their sexual exploits over the weekend. Now, neither of them is offended by the conversation. In fact, they're quite enjoying it. But a person overhears it. They have a cause for offense, and they have a cause for complaint. So what do you do as a supervisor? You do the Barney Fife thing, and you nip it in the bud. You stop it when you hear it. Never walk past a problem. Now, it doesn't mean you have to come down on them like a ton of bricks, but you just go up to them and quietly say, hey, guys, gals, this is not appropriate conversation for the workplace. I'm going to ask you to stop talking about this right now. It could be offensive to somebody else, and I'd appreciate if you stop that and just save that for a time when you're away from work. And that is all that it takes to stop the behavior. Now, sure, if they persist and the word to the wise is not sufficient, then of course we're going to follow up with written warnings and progressive discipline. Now, I've said before at the introduction of this that you may be surprised about the scope of people that can be committing sexual harassment in your workplace. So who can commit sexual harassment? Well, we know employees, supervisors. Now, wait a second, vendors? I'm not in charge of vendors. Vendors don't work for me. We don't pay vendors salary. We pay for their goods and stuff, but yes, vendors. Because as a supervisor, you need to protect your employees from sexual harassment that you see or that you should have been aware of. Now, let's say you have a particular vendor that comes in, and by the way, most of the time, the ones that are guilty, we know who they are. We know that they come in and they're trying to be slick and they're trying to, be flirtatious and that sort of thing. Let's say you have an employee that just makes their way to the back of the store whenever this vendor comes in. You can see that they're trying to avoid this person. You need to find out what's going on there. We've had situations where vendors have come in and have been offensive to our employees and just said, this is at a previous job, and said, look, we called up the company, said, we will not tolerate this, and we had a different vendor the next time that truck came around. So please be on the lookout for any sources of sexual harassment. What about customers? We count on our customers, don't we? Yes, but we will not tolerate sexual harassment from our customers. And we have to be careful. We have to be tactful in how we approach this, but generally, a tactful discussion with our customer will adjust their behavior such that they start behaving appropriately. And in fact, I have to say, for those one or two customers that don't get it, I think we would be better to just do without their particular business than we would to abide them sexually harassing our employees. If you have a problem with a supervisor, okay, now here's what I'm talking about here. This is for you employees. Let's say the supervisor is the problem. Let's say they are the ones that are harassing you. You go one step up from that supervisor. That's who you talk to. That's who you make aware. And you can always go to your HR department, and you can always call Lions HR if we provide HR services for you. So you go one step up, okay? Now, let's say it's another employee who is causing the problem. A simple, frank confrontation is what it's going to take. We're going to talk about that here in just a second. If a vendor or customer is bothering you, talk to your supervisor. Never respond in a hostile manner to that to that customer. You want to make your supervisor aware of it and let your supervisor handle the situation. And then also let your HR manager know about the problem so that they can be on the lookout for it. Now, what should I do? If you're the victim of workplace sexual harassment and are comfortable doing so, here are the steps. This is what you do. The first thing is, if you're comfortable, confront the individual. Now, what do I mean by that? I mean that you speak to the individual that's causing offense, all right? And we don't want to do this in a respectful and a tactful manner. You explain firmly but politely that the behavior is not welcome. I recall one time I went to a store as a HR manager, and an employee, a female employee, came up to me, and I don't know what they did. I know, give me, scratch on the neck or something like that. But it was, it was kind of flirtatious, but it was innocent, but it was physical contact. You know what I'm saying? And I looked at them and I said these words to them. Look, I appreciate that you're being friendly. I really do, but don't touch me. And they kind of laughed and looked at me, and I said, no, I'm serious. Don't touch me, because I don't want there to be a misconception about our relationship. So it's a little awkward, I will admit, but it gets the point across. I was friendly. I continued to be lighthearted with people and stuff, but there comes a time where you got to get a little bit serious and say, hey, I'm really not joking about this. You don't touch me. And you may feel a little bit, like a fuddy-duddy. You may feel like, I don't want to be a killjoy. I don't want to be a wet blanket. I want to be fun. I want to be fun to be around. I want to be liked. But we're really not there to be liked. We're there to make sure that things go to the benefit of the company and that work gets done in the most effective and efficient way possible. So explain firmly but politely that the behavior is not welcome. Simply ask the person to stop. And that's exactly what I did with this employee. Please don't touch me. It doesn't get much more simple than that. It's straightforward, right to the point. And then report your conversation to your supervisor as an employee. Just let them know, hey, look, this is not a problem. I'm not trying to make waves here. I'm just making you aware that I spoke with so-and-so. They were receptive. They said they wouldn't do it again. I'm just letting you know. All right. Now your supervisor is aware, so that if something happens again, they have a little bit of background, they have a foundation to work on. And you can always immediately report instances to your supervisor without confronting the individual. Don't feel like, well, Dave said on that webinar, I have to talk to the person, and I was afraid and I didn't want to. No. If you're comfortable, confront the individual. But if you are not comfortable confronting that individual, then you can always talk to your supervisor and or your HR manager. That includes Lions HR if we provide HR services for you. Do not ignore the problem. Now, I'm talking in particular to supervisors. If you walk past a problem, what are you doing? If you walk past a problem and you know that there's a problem there and you walk past it, what are you doing? I can hear some of you saying it already. You're condoning it. You're saying it's okay. So we don't want to do that. As supervisors, we have to step up and take responsibility and make sure that we resolve problems. Be part of the solution. You never want to be part of the problem. So first of all, make sure that your communication and behavior is 100% acceptable. Yeah, you might feel like a nerd. Oh well, that's part of it. As a manager, as a supervisor, as a leader, we're not there to set some sort of style standard. We're there to toe the line. We're there to uphold the highest values of the company, because from you, everything goes downhill. You set the highest example there is. So everything that you expect from your employees is going to be as good as what you do, and it will kind of dilute from there. So you want to make sure that you set the highest example. Next, you always want to opt to be professional. If you have a choice, don't take a chance. Always opt to be professional. Make sure that you make it a choice. Don't be overly casual with any coworker. This is perhaps the greatest problem that I have seen occur, especially with newer supervisors, less experienced managers and supervisors. Here's what happens. They had friends when they were coworkers, okay? And then they get promoted, but they still want to socialize with the people that they now lead. Well, that causes a problem because you become overly casual. You have a different relationship as a supervisor. The law looks at things differently when you are the supervisor. You carry some weight now. You could hire or fire them. You could give them a raise. You could cause them to lose their job or to move up in their job. And that's a dynamic that you don't want to be muddied with overly casual relationships. Not to mention the fact that if you have a certain set of friends and there's another group of workers that you don't hang out with, what are they going to think? Well, he's showing or she's showing favoritism. How do you argue against that? It'd be pretty difficult, wouldn't it? So you don't want to be overly casual. You are not one of them anymore. And that's something we have to kind of grab onto. It's neither good nor bad. It is just the way it is. As a supervisor, you enter into a different relationship with people that you may have palled around with before. Consensual behavior today does not guarantee no problems in the future. Workplace romances are risky. We already talked about that. Can we prohibit them legally? No, I don't think so. I don't think we can prohibit people from entering into a relationship. But it is a foolhardy endeavor. It is wrought with all kinds of legal dangers. So I'm just letting you know that I had a saying that I would use at my former workplace. I said, you've heard the saying that there's plenty of fish in the sea. I said, just don't go fishing here. And that's really what the best way I could put it is that to keep yourself out of problems. I'm not going to be the one that's going to get in trouble over this. It'd be the person who entered into that kind of relationship. I was trying to protect them. Do not join in joking or behavior that's borderline. And you know exactly what I'm talking about here, right? It's not overtly sexual, but it has that double meaning. It has that, wink and a nudge kind of a feel to it. It's where you know what the person's talking about and it's getting risque. And you'll notice this about joking, that it always goes downhill. So we want to make sure that we don't enter into joking or behavior that is borderline. So a lot of people throw their hands up in the air and say, is any behavior safe? Normal, friendly interactions such as generic compliments, professional comments, holding the door, commenting on a hairstyle, and socially acceptable interactions such as shaking hands that would not offend a reasonable person, are absolutely fine. Of course they are. So make sure that if it has anything to do with physical contact with a person, that you really weigh that out, that you consider, is this the best way to interact with the person? Remember the adage, default to it, don't touch employees. Don't touch employees. And remember that just because a person is not offended today by a particular action, that does not mean that the same action tomorrow is not going to cause offense. I hope this sinks in, because it can save you a lot of heartache later on. To be sure that you're acting professionally, do not touch coworkers. I've said that about 1 billion times now. Please don't touch coworkers. It is advisable not to pursue a relationship in the workplace. Word to the wise. So what's not okay? Well, commenting on a coworker's body. Now notice how I'm not talking about their uniform, because I might say like, hey, you look sharp today. You look professional today. Wow, you really look the part today. Something along those lines. Do you see how that is just a very generic comment? But saying something about the person's body, like, wow, you really look hot today, or you really fill out that uniform nicely, or wow, you're beautiful. Something along those lines, that it's just inappropriate in the workplace. That's commenting on the person's body. Touching. Sexual talk, kidding, gesturing, jokes, and innuendos, not appropriate in the workplace. Overly familiar relationships, which include partying with subordinates or supervisors. What happens when you party? Drink. What happens when you drink? Inhibitions go down. What happens then? Well, we all know what happens then. And that can cause a lot of problems. Please, the overly familiar relationships alone is reason enough not to enter into that kind of behavior. Romantic behavior with coworkers or going out with coworkers. Once again, I cannot prohibit, I can't say, hey, there's a law against it. There is not, but it is risky behavior, and I'm just letting you know that it's risky. Suggestive dress. When I say suggestive dress, I'm not the clothing police here. I'm talking about things that are exposed, a lot of skin, that maybe would be more appropriate in like a club setting or a beach setting or something along those lines, and not in the workplace. And generally, we have guidelines for our office appearance, and I think we're all, as mature adults, we know what I'm talking about here. It is never appropriate to view pornography or cartoons depicting sexual situations in the workplace or on your phone. I mean, it's just not worth it to risk causing offense to somebody. Finally, let's just conclude. Sexual harassment, it's serious in the workplace, okay? It's something that I want you to be aware of, and it's something I want you to make your employees aware of. Make sure that they know how to handle it if it happens. Make sure that they know how to confront somebody tactfully. Make sure that they know if they are uncomfortable confronting somebody, that they can always come to you and or go to their HR person. Now you say, well, I want them to come to me, not the HR. Why? Isn't it better to handle this sooner than later? Let them go to whomever they feel comfortable with, so that it resolves a problem. And certainly at no time would we ever retaliate against anybody for raising a sexual harassment complaint. And one of the ways that we inadvertently do that is somebody raises a complaint and say, well, I'll just send you home tonight so you don't have to deal with it. Well, now they lost hours. Do you see what I'm saying? So if you enter into a situation and you're wondering what to do, consult with your HR manager on site if you have one. And if not, call your regional HR manager at Lions HR, and we'd be more than happy to counsel you and guide you along in some of these difficult situations. Some, each is unique, and each is going to require a different approach, but we are here to help you with those. I want to let you know that we have another webinar coming up on Friday, same time, and it will be on how to access pay information. And this is going to be fantastic for supervisors and employees alike. Be on the lookout. I will send another constant contact about that, but it can save you from answering a lot of questions, especially at this time of year when everybody's anxious to get those W-2s and their pay information. Thank you for joining me. This presentation will be available shortly on the training website, www.lionshrtraining.com, and I will send out a constant contact advertisement letting you know how you can log into it. Thanks for joining me. Have a great afternoon.